The Forgotten Prince. The day everything changed. Long ago, in the hills of Israel, there stood a royal city called Gibeah. High above the homes and markets, a great palace overlooked the land. Its stone walls gleamed in the sunlight, and its gardens were filled with flowers, olive trees, and singing birds. This was the home of King Saul, the first king of Israel. And among all the people who lived in the palace, there was one little boy whose laughter could be heard almost everywhere. His name was Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth was the grandson of King Saul and the son of Prince Jonathan. Though he was born into a royal family, he was not concerned with crowns or thrones. Like most children, he loved adventures, games, and exploring every corner of the palace grounds. On this particular morning, Mephibosheth ran through the palace gardens as fast as his little legs could carry him. In one hand, he held a small wooden toy chariot that he had carved with the help of one of the palace craftsmen. "Faster! Faster!" he shouted as he raced along a stone pathway. In his imagination, he wasn't just a little boy. He was a mighty warrior, a brave explorer, a hero on a grand adventure. As he rounded a corner near the garden fountain, he nearly collided with a tall figure standing in his path. Before he could fall, strong hands caught him. Mephibosheth looked up and his face instantly lit with joy. "Father!" Jonathan laughed warmly. "And where do you think you're racing off to, young prince?" Mephibosheth held up his toy chariot proudly. "I was chasing the enemy army." "The entire enemy army?" Jonathan asked with a grin. "All of them." Jonathan shook his head playfully. "Then Israel is fortunate to have such a brave defender." The little boy laughed. Jonathan scooped him up and carried him through the gardens. To many people, Jonathan was known as a mighty warrior. He had fought in great battles and led soldiers into dangerous situations. But to Mephibosheth, he was simply his father. And there was no one in the world he admired more. The two spent the morning together. They practiced with wooden swords beneath the trees. Jonathan taught him how to stand tall, how to stay balanced, and how to show respect even to those who were weaker than him. "Being strong isn't about winning every fight," Jonathan explained. "It's about protecting others." Mephibosheth listened carefully. He always listened when his father spoke. Later, they sat beneath a large olive tree overlooking the city. The wind gently rustled the branches above them. For a few moments, neither spoke. Then Mephibosheth asked a question. "Father." "Yes." "Who is David?" Jonathan smiled. It was a question he had heard before. "David is my friend." "The giant fighter?" "The very same." "The shepherd who became a hero?" Jonathan nodded. Mephibosheth's eyes widened. "Have you really met him?" Jonathan laughed. "More than met him. He is one of my closest friends." The little boy stared in amazement. Jonathan looked toward the distant hills. "You know, a true friend is one who keeps his promises." "What kind of promises?" "The kind that last forever." Mephibosheth thought about that. Promises seemed simple enough. But the way his father spoke made them sound important. Very important. Neither of them knew that those words would one day change Mephibosheth's life. As the day continued, the atmosphere around the palace slowly began to change. Servants hurried through hallways. Messengers rode in and out of the city gates. Soldiers gathered in the courtyards. Something was happening. Something important. Mephibosheth noticed it too. The adults seemed quieter than usual. More serious. Whenever he entered a room, conversations suddenly stopped. He didn't understand why. But he could tell something was wrong. Inside the palace, King Saul met with his commanders. Maps covered large tables. Military leaders discussed reports arriving from across the kingdom. The Philistines, Israel's greatest enemies, were preparing for war. Soon, Israel's army would march to meet them. As evening approached, soldiers prepared their armor. Blacksmiths worked late into the night. Horses were saddled. Weapons were sharpened. The kingdom was preparing for battle. That night, Jonathan visited Mephibosheth before bedtime. The boy sat quietly on his bed. For the first time all day, he looked worried. "Father." Jonathan sat beside him. Yes, my son. Are you leaving tomorrow? Jonathan nodded gently. We must help protect Israel. Mephibosheth lowered his eyes. Jonathan understood immediately. The little boy was afraid. Reaching into a small pouch, Jonathan pulled out a tiny carved wooden lion. It wasn't large. It wasn't fancy. But it had been carefully made. Jonathan placed it in Mephibosheth's hands. The boy examined it closely. A lion. Jonathan smiled. Do you know why lions are special? Because they're brave. Yes. Mephibosheth held the carving tightly. Jonathan placed a hand on his shoulder. Courage doesn't mean you're never afraid. It doesn't. No. Jonathan smiled kindly. Courage means trusting God even when you are afraid. The little boy nodded slowly. Then Jonathan added something Mephibosheth would never forget. No matter what happens, remember this. What? God never forgets his children. The next morning, the army departed. Soldiers marched through the city gates. Banners waved in the breeze. King Saul rode at the front. Jonathan rode beside him. Mephibosheth stood atop the palace walls watching. The wooden lion rested safely in his hand. For a moment, Jonathan looked back. Their eyes met. Jonathan smiled and raised a hand. Mephibosheth waved back enthusiastically. Then the army disappeared over the horizon. Days passed. At first, life seemed normal. The palace remained busy. Servants continued their work. Meals were prepared. Children played. But gradually, the waiting became harder. Every day Mephibosheth sat near a window overlooking the road. Every day he watched. And every day the road remained empty. Then one afternoon, everything changed. A horse thundered through the city gates. Its rider was wounded. Dust covered his clothing. His face was pale. The moment the guards saw him, they knew something was wrong. People rushed toward him. Questions filled the air. The messenger barely had the strength to speak. Inside the palace, news spread quickly. Whispers became gasps. Gasps became cries. The battle had been lost. Israel's army had fallen. King Saul was dead. Jonathan was dead. The kingdom was broken. Mephibosheth did not hear the entire report. But he saw the fear. He saw the tears. And deep inside, he knew something terrible had happened. Suddenly, his nurse burst into the room. Her face was filled with panic. We must go. Mephibosheth looked up. Go where? She grabbed a few belongings. We don't have time. Where's father? The nurse froze. For a moment, she couldn't answer. Then she picked him up. We have to leave now. Outside, chaos had consumed the palace. Families were fleeing. Servants rushed through the streets. People gathered what they could carry. Fear seemed to spread everywhere. The nurse held Mephibosheth tightly as she hurried toward safety. The little boy clutched his wooden lion. His heart pounded. Nothing made sense. Everything was happening too fast. Then, as they raced down a rocky path outside the city, the nurse glanced behind her. Her foot struck a loose stone. She stumbled. Time seemed to slow. Mephibosheth slipped from her arms. His eyes widened. The wooden lion flew from his hand. The sky spun above him. And just before he hit the ground, everything went dark.